Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Storybook Brawl podcast Into the Story. This is Bahamut, and today we have another guest, except this isn't just a temporary guest. This is a permanent guest and a personal friend of mine, FortyDust.
Hello.
Oh, what's up, bud? How's it
How's it
going?
going, guys?
So, 40 is a long time friend of mine, card game player. 40, why don't you tell, everybody a little about yourself?
Mostly my background is in trading cards, trading card games, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, Force of Will, Magic, The Gathering, kind of the paper stuff before the digital stuff, and then Hearthstone, which seems to be kind of a common theme. And now Storybook Brawl.
Yeah, I mean,
and I will say I met 40 about 5 minutes ago, and I already think he's a great guy. So I just want to get an endorsement out there right away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Endorsed by Keith, like grandma.
I'm gonna get a shirt. Keith approved.
Yeah.
Kid toasted, Keith approved. All right, so we have some interesting topics that we're actually going to touch on today. Something very big happened. We had a patch. I think we're gonna just break into that. So everybody here is pretty much read the patch notes. We've all got like a certain idea of like what we like, what we don't like. Things that are essentially strong and things that have gotten stronger, and then some things have gotten a little bit weaker, but they still remain strong. We'll touch into some of those topics more in depth, and we're also going to be talking about things that are more based around game theory and design, as well as our opinions about the current game and what we think could either go better and what the folks that are making Storybook Brawl are doing actually extremely well. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with like the thing that stood out to me the most was the Zelhua change. He was probably the weakest leader out of all of the ones that you could choose, I guess. But these changes, I think, have made him completely playable now, outside of just masking into him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually had a chance to play him once today. I obviously didn't play it perfectly, but I did start to see some like unorthodox lines, especially because you can start to like the obvious issue is like generating enough tempo to not like die before you get to tier 5 or even like not too low on tier 4. But you can like grab some pretty cheap triples, right? Like tripling 5s is like super easy with him. So I think it's going to take a bit to figure out a playstyle with him. But I do think that there's more of a place for him in the game now for sure.
Yeah, and half cost sixes are never a bad thing.
No. Never. Clack, what do you think?
Pretty much the same thing. I've heard it from a few people in the Storybook Brawl Discord that they have not had success with him, but like you were mentioning, Keith, just give it a little bit of experimenting, whatever. Find the right lines to make it to 5-6, and seems like a really good hero to actually play. The trial and error process.
Sure.
Yeah, I do think you want to be trying to jam level spell. Like most years, you want to do this anyways. But I think you want to be trying to jam level spells, get to 4 as fast as possible, and actually try and save gold. Like I don't know what health you need to be at, but I wouldn't be so worried about your health as much as that you have like enough gold and you're on 4 fast enough to actually like use this hero power, right? So
I'm not quite too sure if getting to 4 or getting to 5 is more important with him to leverage his hero power.
Sure.
So that's going to be a little bit of, like I said, trial and error to try to figure out what would be the best line to try to figure out with him.
I mean,
well, that's a good point.
I think most people would probably think it would be 5, right? But I honestly think that stabilizing on 4 might be a little bit better. I think the 4 cost triples like might be able to stabilize your board infinitely faster than I think the 5. I mean, the treasures are not nearly as good, right? I mean, you get the book, the random spell, you get Gilded Harp, you get Dwarven
like
Forge,
Reduplicator,
things like that. I mean, Reduplicator is like fine, could totally swing you back, especially with like the changes to like Juliet and stuff, making her a 7/7 versus a 6/6. I think that point actually makes her a little bit better of a unit now. I want to get the rest of everybody else's takes on what they read from the patch list, what they thought was interesting.
Yeah, I actually personally thought that the one that stood out the most to me was the Juliet and Romeo change. Just because like me and Quinn have been doing some co-oping. Quinn was like somebody we had guesting our last show. For anybody that didn't catch that, me and him co-op together quite a bit, and he played Romeo and Juliet quite a bit more than I did before the patch. He's also somebody that like plays a lot of Snow Angel like I do, but I wasn't leaning quite hard enough on it, and I actually think it was pretty good pre-patch. The buff cannot be that meaningful, right? Like it's only +1/+1, but like it just feels like it was already good enough. So like anything on top of that is just better. And so
which ends up probably getting another +1/+1 with the Romeo buff too. Right.
Yeah. There's like the
can end up being just pretty relevant.
Yeah, maybe I should review. I mean, I'm assuming people have read the patch notes if they're listening to this, whatever. But basically, she got a +1/+1 buff, and then when Romeo resummons her, it gives an additional +1/+1. So just a little bit more juice on that. So I'm somebody who likes to play a lot of good comps. I've been trying to push 4 a bit more aggressively and trying to pair game less on 3. It's been working well. So I think this could incentivize you to pick up Juliet a bit more aggressively. And I think in general, I think it's just going to be a decent buff to good comps overall.
Yeah. It's the deck that I kind of like to play, but like I don't always want to play kind of thing. So now I feel like I want to play it a little bit more.
Yeah. Always nice when they like certain buffs can kind of, regardless of whether or not they're objectively like make the comp super stronger, they can just highlight little things where you're like, oh, like I'll try out this synergy. And maybe this is the kind of synergy that was fine before, but now more people are going to try it and discover that, well, this is actually like something that's worth investing in. So
yeah.
I think you could turn it more into a long-term game plan, right? Now that the stats are just a little bit higher. I mean, before like you think about it, it's like tripling a Juliet. Like it's like It's like I really invested 12 gold to make it a 12/12, and now it's a 14/14. I mean, that's a difference in a fight a lot of the time. Like,
yeah, I think it's still like philosophy wise, like the game is still 1-on-6, and you build your comps on 6 for the most part. But I do think it gives you a bit more. It just like widens the mid game options a bit more, right? Where you're not feeling like I was feeling pretty suffocated there for a while, where I felt like I couldn't play evil comp, I could only play good comp, and like the only thing that I could play was Godmother, and like that was wrong. But like that's how I was starting to feel. Yep. And I think as each of these changes is discussed, I think it just like opens up the mid game a bit more. And the more options you have in the mid game, the more health you can preserve, and then the more you can actually like play the game. And to me, like if I don't make it to 6 in a game, I don't feel like I actually got to play. You know?
Yep.
Which is weird because for me, like the fun is everything up till 5. You know what I mean? So for me, everything it's like I really enjoy up to 5, and then 6 is like, okay, let's grab up my 6s and let's try to win. So.
Yeah, I love that. I actually, just as like a bit of an inside thing, like when me and Forty were talking before the episode, like I think I don't know if what would you use the term casual, or I don't know what the word would be, but it sounds like there's a different side of the game that you kind of focus on, right? And it's a lot more fun focused. And I think I really appreciate having like a wide variety of perspectives on this podcast, because as we were talking in the last couple episodes, we're kind of running into these situations where we're like, well, you know, from a competitive standpoint, you know, I like this, or I think this is important, but like that's not always the main focus of a game, right? Like there's a wide variety of people playing this, so I'm really looking forward to having a variety of perspectives on here.
Well, like in the TCG world, you know, you have like your locals and your regionals, and you know, tournament play for me is so different than like your regular play, you know. Yeah. And online is I guess a little bit different because you know it's all about ladder, you know, and ratings and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like all that kind of mixed into it, like this is the kind of patch that I kind of like to see, because it's like little incremental changes. It doesn't really affect the waves too much, you know. It makes things just a little bit better, you know, whereas like a bad patch is like things swing crazy and erratic, and you know, and it really messes with the flow of stuff. But yeah,
Godmother.
True. Yeah, that buff ended up being pretty significant for sure. But I do think that like there are, I don't know, without going into a tangent, like there's been a lot more power leveling going on recently, and I think that that's been a secret nerf to the Godmother stuff a bit. Just because she drops off pretty quick once people are on 6, in my opinion.
What Godmother buff are we talking about exactly?
Just like the original buff, when she got buffed from +0+2 to +0+3 when a good minion dies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and just how that was Clark was kind of highlighting how that was more of like a swing, and that was like a dramatic buff to that unit. So.
Oh yeah. No, now I'm following.
Yeah, for sure.
Clark, what about you? What were you excited for, or what did you notice and thought was extremely interesting?
Probably the same thing that everyone here and most people that pay close attention to the game noticed is, we have like a little bit of a ramping XP ramp issue in the game, and since they nerfed that a bit, it might make the game feel a bit better. I haven't had a chance to play since the patch was released, but I'm hoping that, we're not going to see people skyrocketing to 6, even, before skip, et cetera, like super easily. And we'll see a bit more of relevance in the mid game in our games, which is good. It's a really good thing.
Yeah, I think that we've all called out the XP ramp thing. I mean, there's been games where I've hit 6, 3 entire turns before skip playing a hero that has no business being that high. Especially when you get to like mask into skip, that's just gross. Like, and we've talked about this before, but it feels like that XP acceleration gives you such an upper hand, and I don't feel like you're losing much, if anything, because you're building your comp while everybody's still scrambling to make their strongest board. So, but yeah, I hope this slows that down just a teensy bit. I think removing the health from Turkish Delight was also good. But I'm going to go ahead and let Forty expand on what he thought was interesting about this patch.
What I thought was interesting is actually seeing how they handle patches in this one. So like you got a lot of units that needed a little bit more help, and they went with like a 2-2. You have some that got like the 1-1. Like Nian went from 8-8 to 10-10. Siren went from 8-8 to 10-10. Apple Tree went from 15 to 18, so that's like a 3 hit on the defense, whereas like Juliet gets a 1-1. So it's kind of Puff gets a 1-1 from 5-5 to 6-6. So to me it was kind of interesting to see like how they differentiated stuff. Like Chupacabra got 2 attack to 7-5, but out of all of them I really like the Nian going up to 10-10, because that kind of makes it a no-brainer for me to kind of pick up. But I think like Siren probably could have used an additional attack. It probably didn't need the defense. It probably could have gone up like Chupacabra to have a little more attack, because I really want to like Siren, but I never feel good about playing Siren.
I love Siren.
Yeah, I think me and Kleck are both kind of have been playing that card more. Like, have you ever tried throwing it in like the 5th spot, 40, as like a backline proc?
Oh yeah. I kind of want it to be my favorite card, but like that's we were talking earlier about the casual play versus tournament play, and part of me is kind of like, I really don't want to play it. It's but I would have loved for that actually to have higher attack and lower defense, and let that at least grab one thing once, as opposed to try to swing multiple times, with more defense on it.
Yeah. The other thing to note is that like these buffs become more relevant when you triple these units, right?
Yep,
because they multiply. So you could see something like a triple Nian, like the 2020. Not only is that a more viable unit on your board, but it's also something that's when you kiss it, like is that true? That's not true.
No, it doesn't carry.
The buffs
over.
don't maintain when you kiss it. But regardless, those units when you triple them, which a lot of the time I'll pick up a Siren, I'll pick up a Mummy, and I'll see the second one, and it's a lot more reasonable to pick it up because I can triple it. And now that whole thing just kind of accelerates, and it just makes these cards more viable, and it gives you more options, because it did feel like there were quite a few dead cards on 5, regardless of whether they were correctly being evaluated or not.
Yeah.
I really like the Slay. I really like the Slay, kind of, the Slay cards. And so I kind of like that. I feel like I got like a little bit of a buff on the Slay end of things here a little bit. So
yeah, true. That's true. And if they can, I don't know, it's a bit tough. I think for me, when I look at Slay, it's something that like scales you in the mid game, but ultimately, since you're building most of your comps on 6, like it feels really bad to me when like I spend my entire mid game as Sadrak building up a Shadow Assassin, and then my only goal is to turn it good and play it in a good boy comp, right? It's like that kind of feels bad to me. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That gets into game design too. That's a good little segue for a later part of the conversation.
Or even we could even get into that now, I guess, right? Like how
I wanted to talk about the elephant of the patch. and
Ooh.
see what
Uh-oh.
y'all had to say about it.
Ooh, are we
Uh,
standing? Are we standing in the middle of the road with like hands at the sides, about to draw guns on this?
I think so.
I'm throwing Kleck under the bus. He's going under. I don't care.
Well, okay, that's fair. But there's no buses here, only boys, and they're of the good variety. I think that was
Perfect.
actually the smartest nerf that they could have made. Like
smart is.
it doesn't completely reshape and redesign the way that the card interacts. However, as Kleck has mentioned, and as Keith has mentioned before, cards require investment, right? Adventure requires investment. Brave Princess requires investment. Now Good Boy requires even more investment. Like, you can't just pick up a Good Boy and get 5/5 across the entire board. You get 3/3 at best, right? Depending if you have offensive buffs or if you're playing Sharon, then that changes things a little bit. But overall, right, I feel like that was a really solid nerf that they implemented. Yes, they could have gone down the route of, making it not be able to use relics for empowering or something like that, but that completely changes the entire card design.
You kind of break the game a little bit if you try to do that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's what they were trying to do. I think they were just trying to make it so it's not just like a splashable unit where you go ahead and throw it in for like 3 extra units and you get 15 stats across the board, right? Your Echo Wood is now, a little, like a lot bigger when you have 5 or 6 good units. Like, you actually have to invest like spell or a support or something in order to make it I don't want to say useful, because it is very useful, but more impactful. What do you guys think?
I guess where I would start with is, like, if you want to look at Good Boy as like a holistic card, right? Like what it's looked like over its lifetime. There was a time in this game in closed beta when all that Good Boy did was give +5/+5 to all your good units. So like that was the place that this card started, and then it was decided that, well, that wasn't good enough. We need to find a way to make this stronger. And I don't know what the game looked like back then. It would be interesting to hear how those comps looked when that was all that Good Boy could do. But it does feel like the buff everything with my attack, or my entire stats, like it does feel like that is a lot splashier, and it kind of fits into the like, oh, Bear Steam buffs the bear, which buffs the everything in this game once you get to 6 is just kind of turbocharged, and it feels really cool. But it just felt like the Good Boy was a little too cool. Yeah. So the question is, how do you make this card weaker without removing that over-the-top panache that the good comps gain from it? So obviously that this buff does nothing, or nerf does nothing to that, right? Like if you get a magic sword, the nerf is almost irrelevant. But leading up to that, that's where theoretically you could say it's a nerf. I personally don't think it matters. Yeah. We'll have to see.
I see how it impacts, and I see how it's a little bit of a nerf, but really why you were playing him is not affected by that 2/2 difference for the most part. And I get the adventure comparison, but you're never going to get the Good Boy look at it and be like, you know what, I'm not going to decide to play this. I'm going to kick it back because it's just not working out for me right now. Like you're gonna keep the Good Boy. You're gonna try to beef the Good Boy and make it work.
It's getting a forever home, right? Like you're not giving that thing up once you got it. So,
yeah.
Forever home.
Good Boy home forever.
This deck was sponsored by the SPCA.
Oh no!
Exactly.
Oh no!
What do you think, Black? How do you feel about these changes?
Pretty much what Keith wrapped up. It's not, and you as well. Like where you, it's not you find the unit and you just have like a ton of stats on board, and it's like, okay, I'm Good Boy, I'm stable, blah blah blah. You find the Good Boy and it's relevant. You have the same goal, but now you don't have as much of this instantaneous power spike where you're like ultra comfortable, right? Like now you need to find resources. You need to find that magic sword or those spells or whatever to buff up the Good Boy and make your board state way more relevant to survive and not take damage in the late game.
Yep. That's what I was talking with 40 about earlier, is like 5/5 stats across the board. I mean, that's a pretty big chunk, right? That makes your board stable. I mean, 3/3 across the board, it's a little I mean, it can be less relevant, but I don't like. I feel like 5 is a stronger breakpoint than 3. Is 5 is greater than 3, so obviously. But
Oh no, we're doing math on this show now.
Oh, no. That's why I was primarily wanted to call it out, because I think there is some. It's obviously still like, I'm not going to say, oh, good boy is dead, good comps are dead, it's over.
Yeah.
Scrap it up. Everybody start picking up Medusa and pumpkins. That's like, no. Like, if you get a good boy, you're still going to play a good comp. Don't yeah. So
one thing I wouldn't mind just expanding on quickly is I was finding with the old good boy that I was like more likely to just kind of like be half good, half evil, and if I see a good boy, just grab it by the reins and go for it. But I was actually finding that strategy was not always correct, and especially if I had, say, like, I don't know, like one Robin Hood and all evil, I was kind of like forcing good comp, but I realized that like it wasn't working. And then the more I've explored pumpkin comp, the more I've started to understand how it works, and certain text choices like picking up mittens with double apple tree, and like basically this good boy nerf I think will signal to people that they should try some other stuff maybe. And so even if maybe it doesn't make a humongous difference, I think it's going to lead to more diversity in the tier 6 comps. That's what I'm hoping. So that could be good for the game regardless of whether or not it's a nerf in actuality.
Sure. Yeah, and I still, the top 3 comps, I still think it's going to be good, or I'm sorry, trees, then good, then evil. I mean, Slay has its place, like for the early 6, and then on. I mean, the scaling and the, like, there is a ceiling. It's like very niche, but like not necessarily gonna get. I don't think you're gonna necessarily get there unless you're playing Trophy Hunter, right? Then that's just like a completely different meme of a game.
You get to 6 on the Trophy Hunter, good for you.
Yeah, good for you. Keith, I know you had mentioned in the first episode that you wanted to talk about some game design philosophy, and I think this is actually a really solid moment, especially after the first patch of discussing that. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the floor over to you, and give you a little soapbox to stand on about how you feel about all this.
So I got it all warmed up. Don't you worry. I like the soapbox. Yeah, I don't know. I think the first thing I want to say from like an overall holistic standpoint, I love the design of this game. I think it's designed to be interactive. It's designed to have options. It's designed to not have cards be the best card in a vacuum, and it forces you in general to think about every turn and every roll. What is the best decision that I can make, right? Because say you compare it to Battlegrounds, well, you can't always level. So like, well, if I can't level, what else can I do to use this tempo for an advantage? So I really love the way they've built the game. Now, there's always going to be other offshoots that show up, right? It's like if I'm not offered leveling ever and my opponents are, well, that's a downside. So like that sucks. But I think overall, I like how they've designed it. But if you look at the way that a lot of, specifically the way that interactions are handled, they've chosen to go with a design philosophy that favors fun over transparency. And depending how you approach the game, that can feel better or worse. I think the more time you spend playing this and the more you care about being able to predict every interaction, I think the more frustrating it gets, or it has for me anyways. But the more time I spent talking about it, the less that I think that that's important. I just think that like a lot of the other games, like even with Hearthstone Battlegrounds, they had an underlying architecture for how every interaction worked, right? Like, just to frame things for people, like the order of spells and Echowood buffs and Ashwood buffs and round, like all those interactions, like you can't really look at them without having seen them happen and predict what's going to happen. But like you have those same problems with other auto battlers I've played anyways. So I don't think it's as much of a problem as I thought it was. And especially if you don't care as much about like being able to predict things, if you just want to play the game and have fun, I think it's totally fine. But personally, I would prefer if there was a bit more transparency with the interactions and a bit more predictability, if that kind of sums up my thoughts on the current design of the game.
Yeah, I definitely feel you. The moment that I found out that Lordy buffs all your dwarves and then Echowood takes on those buffs before Ring of Meteors hits was a game changer. Because I used to not put Echowood in because I was afraid that the one damage was going to happen prior to my Echowood gaining buffs, and that was a problem, especially when I was playing dwarves at like the lower Ela, because I just didn't realize, And then after watching other people do it, I was like, oh, that actually works. And I believe the way that it was described is it's whatever is most beneficial for you.
I thought it was card effects before treasures.
So that's not
It's not 100%.
Yeah, it's not 100%. There's specific instances where that doesn't necessarily occur, and I can't think of any of them off the top of my head. But from what I understand, at least the way that it was phrased in the Discord is what devs had said is that it's whatever the best order outcome could happen. I know
For
that
the player, yes.
Yeah, for the player. I don't think that's necessarily like transparent, as Keith had mentioned, right? Like, I don't feel like that. Like, we don't know how those interactions would work if we didn't just try it out. Like a day ago, I put a croc down with mirror, and I put a vulture underneath the croc. Don't ask if you don't know. And I had a bear stain, and I thought that the croc would come out. Well, I didn't think that the vulture would come out of the croc on the second mirror one. And then I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe it might. I don't know. I don't think I've ever done this play before. And then obviously it doesn't, because it only spits out whatever the original copy was. So it spit out the vulture, and then the second croc didn't spit out shit. So I was like, oh, all right. But it apparently still makes a mirror copy. So I thought maybe. And that wasn't the case. I ended up losing that game. But anyway, it's things like that, like croc interactions with, the double buffing from Bearstain, and like it keeping its copy or not keeping its copy. And what happens if you knight croc? Like, is the unit underneath? No. And then the same thing with like the bug with Polywoggle, right? Like if you put Polywoggle with Ambrosia, and then you go ahead and you Grimsoul it, you get the unit, but you don't. But at the end of the turn, when you get the unit, it still remains to be a Polywoggle. If I'm correct, like that's not self-explanatory.
No, like I think what the problem I have with it is it creates a bit of a push and pull between I want to win this game versus I want to understand how this game works, right? So if you're in a spot where you don't know how an interaction works, the more you care about winning that specific game or interaction, like you might not want to take that risk to find out, right? And
Yep.
like I'm not saying what's good or bad, but I'm just saying like it creates weird incentives, and it's like it's more like there's like this secret order of there's a secret council that like knows how all these interactions work, and as a community, we're all kind of like working together to try to like figure out how it all goes, and like I guess there's a certain like mystery to that's interesting, but I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me. I prefer that it was a bit more predictable.
Really hate it when I first started playing, and all of a sudden the guy across from me has like a 300 defense creature. I'm like, how the heck did that just happen? And you can't scroll over the card and see like what the buffs are.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah.
And part of that kind of I didn't like it at the time, but actually as we're talking about this now, it made me figure it out. I was like, I'm scrolling over the treasures. I'm trying to figure out like how they got this thing up to where it was. And so, I mean, part of me doesn't like that. I should be able to decode it really easy. But then part of me was like, I wouldn't have spent so much time invested in trying to figure this out, which is a little bit of the allure of the game. But, I guess it's a little bit one or the other.
I think they're both very valid, and that's where I really come off. And whenever I like to complain in chat a lot on Twitch and stuff, but like basically, I tend to say like this is not how I would design the game, but like I get it and I'm okay with it because this is how they've chosen to go with it. So like just as an example, I'm looking at a player Kui has put together like a bit of an interactions guide on Google Docs, and so if his information is to be believed, which they're a pretty thorough person, so I tend to believe what they say. So Ivory Owl buffs, which is a treasure, happens first. Then Ashwood Elm buffs happen. Then Robin Wood buffs debuffs happen. Then Round Table buffs happen. Right? So you've got a treasure, a minion, and then a treasure. So there's no discernible order to those buffs. The only way you know how those things work together is through research and and noting it. So that's just how they've chosen to set things up, and it leads to some really cool interactions, right? And I think there is a lot of marvel in the way that you're like, dude, like I got the trees and then the round table, and then like, dude, my tree's like 300, and it's really cool. So I mean, there's value in that too, for sure.
Yeah. Digits are overlapping. You're like, oh my god, what's this number? It's huge. What's going on?
Yeah.
And we'll go ahead and link that doc at the bottom of the video in the description for all of those that are wondering what Keith is exactly talking about.
Yeah, I just said a bunch of words that may not have made sense over voice, but I think if you look at the text, it's pretty clear kind of how it all lays out.
I'm always wondering what Keith's talking about because he never says anything.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I love this game as well, and I think I agree about the whole transparency bit and the allure and mystery and things like that. I think my favorite part, and we've touched on this in a couple episodes, is that I really love that you can build any board and make it work for whatever situation you're currently in. And you being able to make your strongest board essentially leaves you like you're not pigeonholed into the same thing. And we were talking about Battlegrounds, but it's kind of the same way sort of in TFT as well. You can make transitional boards and things like that, but I think that for a majority of the end game, it's hit the end level, which it would be 6 in this case, find a bunch of things, make a board out of it, and then build whatever is strongest, and then put whatever units that actually work for you during that time. I think that's my favorite part about the game, and it will remain that way until they end up somehow pigeonholing us into comps, which I don't think that's going to happen, or I hope that's not going to happen. So, what do y'all think about that?
I mean, the only thing that's really different between this and like other auto battlers, because they all do the same sort of thing, is I feel like you spend a lot more time at 6 playing the game than a lot of other auto battlers. Usually by the time you get to 6 and the other ones, you're down to like half the players are gone, all your life points are kind of down, and you're kind of battling out right at the end. So I think people maybe feel this whole tier 6 ramp to tier 6 and play also because a lot of the game still exists at tier 6. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and maybe it's just my experience with other auto battlers. But
I agree. Like you said, like the other auto battlers, people die like because there's more damage in the earlier / mid game, and they don't even experience that. Where people ramp up, get to 6, and start crushing people because they get crushed by mid game comps.
Yep.
One thing that stood out to me was just, sorry to cut you off there, Bahamut, but just with if I just think about like comp selection or like the way that the game feels as you move throughout it, right? Like you kind of start off and you're offered 3 shops on tier 1, and you get like 2 or 4 or 5 units, right? So you have like no decisions, right? You're picking a couple things. And then like as you move towards the mid game, right, you get given like all these options and all these opportunities and all these choices. And then the better you navigate that, the better chance you have to set yourself up on tier 6, right? And like sometimes you don't get given the options to set up on tier 6. There's not enough health, you don't find the good boy, you don't find the pumpkin, whatever. But I do find, like Forty was saying, like when you get to 6 and you actually like find a piece you can build around, I feel like the game opens right back up again, right? Like there's so many different ways you can build a pumpkin comp, you can build a good boy comp, and then like the tech choices within those comps are like really influenced by like what your opponents are doing. So it's really easy to say, oh, well, there's only 2 comps in this game. There's good comp and there's evil comp. And it's like, well, maybe, but like, how do you define like what is an evil comp? Like what is a good comp, And once you start to delve into the pieces that build into those comps, I don't know, I might be getting a bit whimsical here, but it feels a bit artistic. It really feels like there's an art to figuring out like what is the right mix of these minions that's going to give me the best chance to win this lobby.
By definition, all good comps are just puff puffs. 7 of them.
Puff puffs in a wombat suit, right?
Yeah. With a good... Actually, it's 6 and a good boy. Sorry.
Yeah.
To further talk about what you were stating, I often find myself, like, if I'm going evil comp or if I'm going free comp, I'm actually open to both, right?
Yes.
I'll have units, level 6 units with synergy of both ends, and then I'll take the direction that the game leads me, or I'll make little incremental changes to try to harder counter, my opponent, knowing what they're running, etc. Like you mentioned.
Yes, I like splashing Medusa in dwarves, for example.
Sure, yeah. Or even like a really classic example that I have is as I've been playing Pumpkin a bit more. In general, I've started to value Apple Tree a lot. I've started to really appreciate that unit. But like I noticed, for example, my opponent was going to be Last Breath Bearstein stuff, and my Apple Tree is going to be like pretty useless against that. So in that case, I'm not going to focus on the Apple Tree stuff. I'm going to focus more on like getting as many pumpkins as I can, getting as many like health buff treasures as I can or attack buff treasures, and build like a death rattle pumpkin comp as opposed to like more of a scam pumpkin, right? So there's those kind of branches that you can kind of look to when you're trying to build those comps. And like I said, a lot of it will be influenced by what your opponents are doing. Now, how much information you have in your opponents is like another thing that you may not have control over. But if you know that stuff, it can really help inform your decisions.
Yeah, like teching Doom, like teching Soul Tokens, Doom Breath, putting in Doom Breath against token comps.
Yeah,
that kind of thing, right? Like you run over a Bear Stain and the Echo Wood that's like sitting next to it because they didn't put Soul Tech in. Like, I think you pretty much win that round, right? Like, because all they have are just like eeny meeny bears and pigs, and like they don't really do anything. So making those decisions based off of the information that you do have, and then being cognizant about that. Now, there is no way currently in the game, I believe, to track that other than using your noggin, but there could be the potential, I think, from what I remember, something like that. Did anybody else watch the dev stream where they had kind of like hinted at like maybe potentially going some direction like that?
Well, you can do that in Battlegrounds, right? You can scroll over the character and it kind of gives you some kind of information, right, as to how many, like if they're building, what are, if they have Murlocs, you scroll over, it says Murlocs or something, right? Is that what you were kind of talking about?
Pretty much. I mean, just getting like some sort of information off of it.
Yeah, the devs are very much aware of the ability to give players that information, but they also are aware that there's a cost to that, right? It's like the more information that you're making publicly available, the more stuff that people are kind of like responsible for, and it's a bit of a balance, I think. So they're definitely like trying. The quote is, "We're working on it," right? So like they're working on everything, and that is one thing that they're looking at implementing, and then it's just figuring out like what is the right amount of information to provide. So it'll be and with Battlegrounds, they've got their internal game tracker that tells you minion types, and I forget exactly what it shows, but then there's external third-party software that's been created to track everything under the sun. So it just depends which way the game wants to go and because I think they could cut off those trackers, or I actually don't know how that all works. So it'll be interesting to see how it all evolves, honestly.
I hope that doesn't get implemented, or like people don't figure out a way. It is a nice like everybody can have it sort of ordeal. So I guess that's like an advantage. But like you could be super sneaky and do like a straight 180 transition, right? Out of the current comp you have, and now somebody has like what you've done by the information that's from the no, like I said, I haven't played Hearthstone Battlegrounds, so I'm not sure if it can tell round by round, but I don't think that it would be necessarily healthy for the game. Like if you want to go for like some kind of surprise factor. Yeah, I don't know. I like the surprise Doom Breath or surprise Good Breath, or I don't know. Just
no, all it does is tracks the information you've already seen. So it's basically it's like basically serving as a memory bank, but like perfect memory, right? So like what information has been publicly available to you, the tracker is skimming, and then it's like reformatting and like putting up on the screen for you. So
gotcha. I guess,
which is okay, but like I said, there's a cost to that too, because you spend your whole time looking at your opponent's board and figuring out what you want to do with it. Let's focus on your own board. So
yep.
I don't know. It's definitely not free. I think people assume that like having access to that information is just like, well, why not? And it's like there is a cost to provide that information. So
yeah, I mean, like I think that public information and things like that, it can be helpful in some cases, but there are like some card games where you could not take down public information.
Yeah, I was gonna say like in real life card games, that's a big no-no. Like that was like the difference between like the turning point from going from like a casual player to one that wasn't like making top tables was your ability to process your own game while still processing what's going on in other people's games, at the other tables and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's dirty.
So
Yeah.
well, so yeah, I mean, so they have all these rules. You can't take notes. Certain
Yeah.
things like But then again, you're also talking about a card game where you can like side deck and stuff. Which can be a lot more impactful. Where you leave some of your
Yeah.
side deck cards in. Against because you're facing this other guy and he has this in his deck.
Yep. But then again, there in Magic they do have public information about like you can write down what's in people's hands, right? Like that, like if you thought sees or you get a peek or you get to see a draw and you know what they have. So I mean, like there are
Yeah.
games where that does exist.
Yeah.
However, I don't think Storybook Brawl should be one of them that do. I guess if that makes sense.
That's the one area that I would say I would need to improve the most on is not just worrying about what I'm playing, but also, oh crap, that guy was playing this last time I saw him. I definitely need to see if I can find a Cupid or a Medusa.
Yeah, or even at a basic level, like if I'm trying to multitask, like if I'm not even like aware that I'm playing a Vela, right? Like, and I'm not teching in a dragon, or I'm not, buying that like backline spell, that type of stuff can really cost you as well. It makes the game you have to pay attention more to know that stuff. So I don't know what's really worth it from that perspective, but.
This kind of opens up like in the comments, like also like to hear your thoughts as a community of what you guys think, essentially what your thoughts are on like public information. Should we not, and pretty much any of the other topics, the buffs, the nerfs, and we want to hear your voice as well. Speaking of hearing other voices, Kleck, what about you? What are some of your design philosophy likes for Storybook Brawl, like comparatively?
What do you mean? Like things I would like to see changed in the game for the future?
And things that you currently like now? I mean, either or work for me.
I'd like to see XP ramp and Godmother nerfed a bit.
That's fair.
And as good as Polywoggle is, and as much of an ambassador and basically like the OG discoverer of how strong it is, I would like Polywoggle nerfed a little bit because it just doesn't make the game feel good anymore.
I mean, I'm pretty good at hitting Lordy off of Polywoggle while I have a full
don't get me wrong, like it has some downsides, but like for a 6 gold investment throughout the game that you would have otherwise probably spent rolling or picking up very small incremental increases to your board, hitting that early 6 on level 5 usually is a hit more than a miss and gives you too much of a power spike.
I agree, but it can still backfire, right? I mean,
it can, but more times than not, it way more benefit than it should be giving you is the point I'm making.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm agreed.
Risk versus reward, it's way more reward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like if I were to pull this back a bit to more of like a general design philosophy thing, when you look at some of the randomness in a game like Battleground, which is my main comparison to this, is like they had Shifter Zeros, and that was kind of like the main RNG thing.
So
maybe there's other things too, but
I wanted to make a note. There was a comment that we had received about talking about other cards from other card games. If we could just explain like all of the like the details.
Yeah. That's a really good idea. I like that because I feel because the only way I can think about this idea is like comparing it to Battlegrounds, but obviously if someone hasn't played that, essentially what Shifter Zeros is there was a card that like you held it in your hand and you could buy it on tier 3 or 4 comparatively to this game, and it would shift into a random minion every turn, like literally any minion in the game, and then you could play it once you got it right. But they decided that was too much randomness and that wasn't fun, so eventually it got removed. Compare that to this game where we've got Polywoggle, we've got True Love's Kiss, we've got there's other ways you get random minions too. So it feels like that balances it a bit, right? The idea is a bit more balanced because there's other ways to access it other than just Polywoggle. But like Kleck's saying, the way that Polywoggle accesses that randomness may be a bit too good.
Yep.
Also, it's a much smaller card pool, right? Too comparatively, so like your chances of getting a dud is a lot less, especially if you're at 5. Like chances are you're going to get something dramatically impactful to your game state.
Absolutely.
For sure. And that's probably part of the problem.
Yeah. Cool.
Is there anything that anybody wanted to see on this this list that didn't make it there?
That's an interesting question.
That's a pretty good question. Maybe I don't know, stat line change or something. Godmother, maybe? Like just a teensy bit of a nerf. I know if we put it back to 2, if we keep it at 3, if she still gets blown out by Mummy, it's not like there's no answer for her. It's not
Right.
like
And apple trees, I've been seeing people play around with apple trees as well.
yeah. So it's not like
It has counter picks, but I feel like we're kind of like in the middle, like you were just kind of just saying, like if we nerf it, it's too weak. If we keep it where it is, it's a little too strong. Kind of hard to figure out that right balance for it.
yeah, and that's like my major issue with cards like that. It's like the same thing with Good Boy, right? Like there's not really much you can do to either break the card or make it useless. It's just like a hard medium that you have to live with. And the game design and philosophy that I dislike when games have to change everything that currently happen within the game around one singular card and like buffing everything else because that is like it's like just turn down the knob on the thing that's strong. However, I understand why they didn't do that. Like I don't disagree. I mean, and they did tweak the knob appropriately. But I think there are some cards that you really can't
See,
do
I'm
that
surprised. I'm surprised that Echo Wood wasn't on the list in some capacity. That was the one thing I saw as missing.
So you would have liked to see Echowood get nerfed? Is that what you were thinking?
I would like to see it. I mean, I really like what they did with Heartwood Elder. In the list, I think that kind of like brings Trent's into a little bit more kind of, like makes them feel better to get into early. And I just feel like Echowood is so splashable with, it's all the characters. I don't know.
Well,
I fight
like
with
what
that
they
one.
intended.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be something they're going to be like, even if a lot of members of the community say that it is, and I'm not saying that it is an issue, but if a lot of members claim that it's an issue or think that it's an issue, that's not going to be something that they're going to want to change right away because it's playing the role that they intended it to. So
Right.
That's something we're going to have to see in the future if they are going to change it.
I mean, it is a splashable card. However, you have to have ways to scale it. Like, if you pick up an Echowood on 6, like, a majority of the time, I'm like, crap. Like, I have this 1/1 that I can't scale because all I could probably do is maybe buff it with Godmother. Or I can maybe, I don't know, maybe get, like, a friendly spirit off. And maybe it might, like, not get the buff and it can hit another minion and, like, all that, right?
And mind you, like the early Echowoods and stuff are actually super susceptible. Like if you go with them early on enough, they're susceptible to dragons, they're susceptible to mummies. They just die instantly if you're opening with a mummy still, etc. So this is something that if it is an issue for people, like I said, it's something that we kind of have to see how the developers treat it, if they treat it at all in the future.
I actually think Echowood's in a good place. I know that
I think the whole community is like 50-50 on it.
Sure. And I don't disagree. Like, I could see it from either side. I just think that, in my opinion, you need a way to scale her. She's not a good standalone unit, right? Hercules is a good standalone unit for the most part, depending on what portion of the game you get it into, right? If you get him early, like on 6, like it's huge. Jorm is also another one, right? You get it early on 6, it's like it's pretty nice. Echowood, I don't feel like has that same power level as those because it's not intended to be like I picked it up on 6 and now I win the game, So
like to me, Echowood is like sort of a cherry on top type card, and like depending on your comp, like when I'm playing more of like a last breath Bearstein kind of focused good comp, I'm a lot more likely to play it. But
Yeah.
something that actually Kui as well, so a player that I really respect, obviously, because I tend to read a lot of their stuff and talk to them, but they don't play Echo Wood that often. And I think Klek was also somebody who's on this train as well, where it's kind of like, if you have a good boy comp, the way that you lose that fight is when your good boy doesn't die, right? Like, as long as your good boy dies like relatively early, you're going to win that fight. Like, you don't need the Echo Wood anyway.
Yep.
So if the only way that you lose is your good boy not dying, well, in that case, it's a disaster because your Echo was just a 1-1, right? So I think there are understanding of these comps, me personally, and the community in general, like our understanding of these comps is continuing to evolve. And so I think the developers have been very smart to take a measured approach in making any of these kind of changes to the game. Even with Godmother, I would choose to disagree with the general sentiment that she might need a nerf. Like I was saying before, I think that the meta has necessitated more of a power leveling style that kind of makes her a less relevant card more quickly. So I would say it's probably fine. I would be willing to accept that I was wrong there, but I personally think she's actually in a fine place with the way the meta has shifted recently.
Yeah, I can see that as well. I don't think anything here is necessarily black or white, right? Like it's not like this is a problem. No, I mean it's all speculation at the moment. I don't think there is a card that I can think of where I'm like, oh, this is just like entirely unbalanced and we shouldn't ever have it in this game. Like, and I think the one thing I want to praise the devs, if you're listening, good job, because there isn't something that I've seen so far where I've like, this is extremely unfair. Or this is.
I mean, there was one example, but in that case, the devs were very fast to fix it, right? Which was the cat book stuff.
Cat book was absolutely outrageous, but holy crap, was it fun to play! I had so much fun playing cat book and being the oppressor on that.
I had fun with it the first day and a half that I abused it. After that, I'm like, this is really stupid.
Yeah,
I feel you.
I think it also just suppressed people's general evaluation of pumpkin comps because they're after doing that they're like, well, why would I bother with pumpkin? This is trash, right? So then it was interesting how long it's taken people even like me who liked pumpkin before to reawaken to the value of that comp. So
yep, 100%. So we only got a couple of minutes left. Anybody have any last minute topics or anything that they want to expand on?
No, I think I got to the soapbox as much as I wanted. Yeah, I think the game's in a good place, and trying to think. I mean, there are some things there's infinite things that I'd love to see in the game, but ultimately I'm enjoying it, and I think as the meta shifts, it evolves on its own. So I think it's in a good place right now.
I think if we tuned back the power leveling stuff and made it so you actually had to play for a strong board all the time, I would feel a little bit better about that, but I understand why. And the thing that I'm kind of unhappy about is that it's like a cascading snowball effect. I play adventure, then you end up playing adventure, then the whole lobby's playing adventure, and then at this point, all of our boards
having adventure.
We all have an adventure.
Hey, that sounds good to me. I don't know what the problem. There's no problem there for me. I like that.
Okay, so,
I like a good adventure.
But say you don't hate adventure, Keith. And now you're now you're stuck on level 4, and everybody else is on 6.
I understand the problem, but I have been appreciating the recent meta a bit more than other people, I think. But I do understand why it can be an issue for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Klek? Anything?
I don't really have much to say. I think we covered a lot of the bases pretty early on in this discussion.
Cool. Yeah. All right, that about wraps it up. Thank you all. Thank you, Forty, for finally joining us. Keith and Klek, you've been wonderful as usual. So, things that are going to be coming up soon. So, previous episode we interviewed with Quinn, the mock tournament winner. This we have game design, and we're hopefully going to try to nab another guest coming up here really soon. It might be a mystery. It might not. Depends. But really excited. Thank you all for the support so far. Views, watch, comment, subscribe, likes, not buying eggs. Appreciate all of that. So let's go ahead and enjoy this patch and just, keep on trucking. Thank you once again, guys, for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.